Thank you, Shepard. Well, militants in Iraq are tightening their grip again. Drivers across the country trying to get a grip on their wallets with higher gas prices again, because no matter where you are feeling it, and how. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto, and it does feel like deja vu all over again, doesn't it? AAA now says the gas prices are up 12 days in a row, and depending on where you live, they're up big. To Cheryl Casoni in New York City on just how big. Hey, Cheryl.
Neil, well, good afternoon. And yes, 12 straight days, consecutive days of gas prices going up across the country. Some cities seeing more pain than other cities. And analysts telling Fox Business that we likely are going to see gas prices continue to go up and up over the next several weeks. Let me give you some examples of what's happening across the country. Take a look at gas prices in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Right now, we're at $3.89. A week ago, it was just $3.85. In Las Vegas, Nevada, out to the west now, $3.79. It was $3.76. That's a gain of 3 cents. Now let's go south if we can. Head down to Dallas, Texas to see what's happening to drivers in the great state of Texas. Well, it was $3.58 last week. Last week it was $3.48. Now it's $3.58. That's a 10-cent gain for Dallas, Texas drivers. And finally, right here, New York City, we are now at over $4 a gallon. We're used to these prices in New York. We're pretty tough here, but still, this is a big shock because that is a gain of 6 cents from just a week ago, Neil. Now, analysts again are saying that we are likely going to see prices continue to go higher. If you remember when Sunni militants took over Mosul, leading into that, we had seen 32 out of 44 days where prices were declining. So yes, it's absolutely about, Neil, the situation that is happening in Iraq right now. We talked to some New Yorkers here, kind of got their reaction about how they were feeling about those big 6-cent jump for these New York. And some said, you know, we're going to have to make some changes. But some said, no, we won't.
I'm not going to stop driving, so I'll pay whatever I have to pay to get around.
Oh, I'll travel less because of it, definitely. I'll stay home.
You only got so much money to allot to gas every week, so if I'm stuck on E, I'm stuck on E.
We go upstate, we're going to double up in cars because to travel, what it costs for gas, everybody doesn't want to pay for it anymore.
Yes, so Neil, certainly, like I said, here in New York, some are going to make changes, some are not. But the overall arching theory for today is that we are going to see prices go higher and higher. I will say, though, oil did close down 66 cents today, oil closing at 106.17 on the session. But this is, again, a temporary situation. Analysts say that's not going to have an impact, and gas prices still will be heading higher. For the next several weeks, we may hit some new records in the next few weeks, Neil.
12 straight days. Cheryl Casoni, thank you very much. Well, my next guest says if Iraq goes down, we could see gas prices spike by up to $1 a gallon. Joe Petrowski, the former CEO of Gulf Oil. How do you figure, Joseph?
Well, listen, I think 50 to 75 cents is in the card and could easily go over $1 a gallon, given the fact that we're talking 10 to 15 million barrels of oil between Saudi, Iran, and Iraq and the Gulf states. And as we all know, Russia is not a garden spot. Venezuela is having its problems in Mexico. So given that oil is relatively inelastic, there's no doubt that prices are going up. And that's obviously horrible. That's about $1,500 per person in the United States. I think will be a break on our economy.
If it were to continue, right? I mean, the other argument is that the markets are pouncing on the fear of disrupted supply. The supply itself has not formally been dramatically disrupted. It's the fear that it will. So is this reaction justified?
Oh, I think it is, because obviously you can't involve a Shia-Sunni civil war in 4 countries. Iraq is gone, will be divided. I mean, the only thing that's keeping oil prices from going up much higher is that we have done a good job with shale and drilling in this country, and we've done a good job on efficiency and CAFE standards in holding our consumption down. But I think it's very justified given the fact that this is an all-out civil war between the Sunnis and the Shia. And so far, we haven't had infrastructure, pipelines bombed, or refineries, though they have made some attack on refineries. But I think the market has to price that possibility in which case we could have $15 to $20 up on oil.
Which would mean what for gas? What would that mean for gas?
75 cents on gasoline, probably, to $1.
More than it is now.
More than it is now.
Gotcha. Well, on that happy news, Joseph, Thank you.
Well, no,
go
I
ahead,
think
finish the thought.
but there is some good news, Neil. The good news is there are things we can do in this country to mitigate that. The longer-term fear is that the winner of this battle between what I call the sand psychos, whether it's the Shia or the Sunnis, will control the spigot for lots of revenue and cause mischief. And that, I think, is the bigger fear for Americans long term.
Yeah.
Every time we go to the pump, we're writing a $30 check to people who want to do us harm.
Joseph, thank you, I think. Former Gulf Oil CEO Joe Petrowski. Well, ISIS militants, to Joe's point, are moving and moving fast, moving west now, capturing more land in Iraq, including 2 key border crossings. That's raising concern. This thing could spread to other Arab countries, to his point. John Huddy in Jerusalem with the very latest. Hey, John.
Well, hey, Neil, and since you guys were talking about oil, by the way, remember ISIS militants are also fighting for control of that massive oil refinery in northern Iraq, and they're also now trying to take over a hydroelectric dam, a hydroelectric plant in the northwestern part of the country where they already control a wide swath of territory. So having said that, let's go back and focus on the meeting between Secretary of State John Kerry, who met with the Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki today in a closed door, about a 90-minute meeting. Details of the discussion weren't released, but Secretary Kerry said that leaders of Iraq's factions, various factions, must keep their commitments to seat a new parliament this week in hopes of bringing some unity to the country, in the country, and this as Iraqi soldiers abandon their post at a key border crossing along the Iraq and Jordan border. And this is significant because there is a growing concern, as you mentioned, about quote-unquote spillover, the violence spilling in to other countries. And we were up in the Golan Heights in northern Israel earlier along the Israeli-Syrian border. And while we heard some explosions, we didn't see any fighting, but there was definitely an increased military presence there. And Neil, at this point, there are growing concerns about ISIS militants now focusing their sights and trying to gun in on the main border crossing there. And so that's something that Israeli forces are really keeping an eye on.
For
Neil,
good reason. John Huddy, thank you very much. Be safe. In the meantime, former Navy SEAL Jonathan Gillum, who says this is now bigger than Iraq, much, much bigger. Well, we don't have any doubt of that anymore, do we?
That's correct. And Neil, you know, when I left the SEAL teams in 2002, I was an air marshal for a little while, but I went to a company called AMTI, and it was filled with former SEALs, former Team 6 guys, and a group called Red Cell. These individuals back in the day they actually portrayed a terrorist unit within the United States for the DOD. And I learned so much about the caliphate and the movement to the Islamic movement. And we were talking about this back in 2003, 2004, about how going into these areas and occupying a base, we create a void when we go in and we remove the leaders of these countries, because of the way we fight wars now. And here we are this many years later, 10 years later, and we basically see that we've gone in, removed certain leaders, occupied a base, not the country, and now what happens when we pull out, the bad guys move in.
I'm always thinking of Afghanistan.
Sure.
Are they next then?
Well, what you have to understand about the caliphate is that there were 2 beliefs at the beginning, Sayyid Qutb and Osama bin Laden. One was global, one was regional. Ultimately, they're both going to be global, no matter what you believe. But they believe that there's going to be a resurgence of the caliph, which is their Messiah, if they clear out certain areas. And basically,
when you say clear out certain areas,
well,
obliterate anyone in their way as well.
51% of the non-believers. That's what they believe. That's why these guys that are over there, these ISIS warriors, they are so dead set on winning this because they truly believe that their Messiah is going to come back. I believe a lot of them are just psychopathic killers. They've been raised over the past 20 years of war, but that's basically what you're going to see. As we pull out of all these places, this is what's going to fill the void. And what is incredible is that we talk about leaving the war zones, and then we still have problems with our own borders. It doesn't matter if we pull out now or if we go and stay there for a while. It's going to come here eventually. We have to secure our borders. We have to secure the homeland. And then we have to decide how we're going to fight it over there.
All right. In the meantime, John, those are making inroads in Iraq right now. We're told that now, because we've beefed up forces, 300 or whatever they're talking about, around Baghdad. Is that going to make much of a difference in terms of protecting Baghdad or our embassy?
It's going to protect certain interests over there, but I don't think that just sending 300 advisors, and I've been one of those advisors in a country before, it's not going to stop the battle. Not because I don't think my brothers in the SEAL teams and Special Forces are not capable of crushing that, but because the politics are not going to allow it.
All right, so you said, from what you're saying, it's a matter of time before Baghdad goes then.
If this movement continues and we do not fight this correctly, it's not. Well, first off, the fight's not going away. This is an enemy that has to be conquered, and
but we don't know the argument. We don't know this enemy.
Right. The war on drugs is very similar. Right. We spent trillions of dollars since the Reagan era on the war on drugs, and we could have really tamped down the war on drugs, but because of politics and certain things, we just never really made a dent in it. Terrorism is very similar in the fact that these warriors, they actually fight and are supported by society, not by certain societies, and not by a state necessarily, so they can mold in and out. But the real experts out there, they're pretty good at predicting where, how, and when, and who are going to carry out these attacks, and we could fight it pretty well if the gloves were taken off. But unfortunately, we're going to have to learn a lesson, just like we did in the Revolutionary War when we finally figured out standing and looking at each other and shooting bullets didn't work. We're going to have to find that out eventually here as well, I believe.
And you think they're going to force that issue?
Well, they fight in an unconventional manner,
sure.
And I don't think that the political people that we put in charge in Afghanistan or Iraq have done a good job. And these ISIS warriors, Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda is called the base for a reason. It's the base of an ideology. They're willing to wait out Maliki. They'll wait for him to fall. I don't think we're going to see them necessarily go into Jordan because
so more intrusive government in Iraq isn't going to change things, whether Maliki's running it or not.
Domination is the only thing domination and occupation, only thing that's going to change this. Unfortunately, people don't want to hear that, but that's the reality of war.
Jonathan Gillum, thank you very, very much.
It's a pleasure.
Former Navy SEAL. All right, in the meantime.